Okay. Welcome to the Jew York Times. On today's episode, very special episode. It's the big gay episode of the Jew York Times. Every episode is the big gay episode of the Jew York Times. Here is the situation. As a comic in New York, as someone that lives in New York, I know a few members of the LGBTQ community. There's a couple. I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of gay people in New York. That's my hot take. That's like saying who do you think runs the media in Israel? The Jews, Anyways, that was a very, very subtle joke. Okay, so I'm a comic in New York. Obviously I know a lot of people in the LGBTQ community. On top of that, I know a lot of Jews in the LGBTQ community. And just being in New York, and being like a woke white dude or something who tends to try to know my place and know when to talk up and know when not to talk up. I'd always heard grumblings about Dyke March and their treatment of Jewish people in the LGBTQ community and people who have a tie-in to Israel. Israel, by the way, a lot of gays in Tel Aviv, tons of gays in Tel Aviv. This is something that I've always kind of wanted to talk about, but also knew there's no way that I am the right one to have this conversation at all. I hate it when other people try to have conversations on my behalf. I hate I hate being told by white Irish comics on how I should feel about Zionism. I hate, when the Christian right tells us how we should feel about Palestinians. It's just not my place. This, however, is not to out you, but it's more, your place than my place to talk about it.
Is that the big reveal that we're Dikes here on this podcast? Is that the...
Hey, you didn't hear it from me. Whoa. A Jew York Times special report. Yeah.
Just came out of the closet.
Yeah. Mom, Dad, these two, gay. I didn't seek out this conversation. This conversation was approached to me. And when it was approached to me, I was like, yes, definitely. This is something I've always wanted to talk about. And now that I know it's okay to talk, or that's so the wrong way of putting it. But I would really thank you guys for coming on to the podcast. This is a Jew York Times special report. I am, I like to do a little pun after this. I've been saying lately that I'm Barbara Walters with a bris. That is the thing. So, do me a favor, introduce both of yourselves and tell me, what do you guys do?
Sure. Hi. I am Nate Shalev. In life, I have my own consulting business that I do leadership development and employee engagement. But for this conversation, I was a community organizer involved with the New York City Dyke March for about a decade. I left last year and have been involved generally with LGBTQ organizing within New York City, primarily. So that's how I enter this conversation.
I'm Sage Marcus. In life, I'm a music therapy grad student and a creative arts specialist. And I was involved as a marshal of the Dyke March for 2 years prior to last year, 2024, June 29th to be specific. And I was involved in the queer community, involved in activism, and then my worlds collided and Jewish and queer activism just became the only right way.
I guess my big question that everyone here wants to know is there money in musical therapy?
Listen, it's a sensitive topic.
Okay, so let's go through two steps of this. One, for my audience at home, explain to me what is Dyke March, kind of the origins, and how you got involved with it.
Yeah, so the Dyke March started in 1993 with an organizing group called the Lesbian Avengers at the time. There was within, I would say, primarily the gay rights movement then, there wasn't a lot of visibility around specifically women's issues. And so this was started by Lesbian Avengers to have visibility for Dykes specifically. I would say trans inclusion has evolved over time. There has always been trans folks involved, but specifically this was run by the Lesbian Avengers. They would say that the day before the big march in Washington, there was an LGBT march in Washington, they handed out pamphlets to all of the women that they saw, or leaflets. They were really surprised by how many folks showed up the next day. It was, between 10,000 folks. And from that year, every year after, Dyke marches have been happening globally. I was going to say nationally, but it's also globally. It came to New York City the following year, and it's been happening for the past 30 years. The idea is for Dyke visibility specifically to be able to just take up space within the streets. It is a protest march, so it's not like the parade. There's no permits. There's no official coordination with police. The idea is just like Dykes taking up space in a way that we don't normally get to in every other day of our lives, and also often generally within the larger movement.
What is I guess the connection between like the Pride Month and Dyke March? Like, is there a tangible connection, or is it more just like, hey, we do Dyke March stuff during June because this is when you do it?
So it's always been the Saturday before the Sunday Pride Parade. Okay. That's how it's been forever, and it always kicks off at the same time. And so I would say the connection is really that. So you've got folks who are coming in maybe for Pride or just for Dyke March specifically. For many, many years, I stopped going to the like major Pride Parade the next day. And so I would say the connection is mostly time bound, that it's always right before the march, but it is one of the few spaces where you do have it being centered on Dykes, and that is like the Dykes for miles. You know, you show up the next day, and it's a lot of allies, it's a lot of cis gay men. So this is really one of the few times during Pride and ever that this is possible.
Give me 1 second. I'm just going to make sure that we are recording over there. We have the audio going for sure. My Jewish brain. Okay, we are going. Thank God. Okay.
Did you want to add anything about history of Dyke March or?
Well, I was going to ask about what your involvement is with Dyke March. How did you get involved?
Well, I was involved as a marshal for 2 years. So I was living in New Jersey at the time, and I would go to Dyke nights as part of Dyke Beer when I was home for the summer of 2021. Then I went back to New Jersey and still needed a way to be involved in the lesbian community here. And a friend from the queer community told me about Dyke March, and it was post post 2020 when Black Lives Matter really erupted. And I just said, yeah, like, this is important. We need to do it. And it just kept doing it.
What is a marshal?
So marshal are the folks that lock up on the sides of the march and also in the back. So their primary role is to be the insider communication and keep the folks marching safe.
Oh, okay, wait. This is interesting to me. So because there is a march element to it, in order to protect the people inside, there is an element of like safety around. So but barrier, you're creating a barrier basically.
Yeah. So there's some barricades from the Pride Parade the next day, but they're not set up because there's no official coordination with the police, and so the marshals will block traffic. So you block traffic, you block incoming bike lanes, you block counter protesters. There's protection from police if that's necessary. And so the idea is to keep the march moving and to keep the marchers safe from kind of any of these elements.
Gotta be honest, to me, this is such a missed business opportunity, because if you just leave the barriers out for one extra day, charge Dyke March half rate, all of a sudden, that barrier isn't being used the day before.
Yeah. Well,
hello, sharks.
Sure. I mean, the concern would be that we wouldn't be able to control the barriers then, because we would have to work with the police to put them up, and so sometimes they want to confine us. Their idea is to limit the commotion, and we want to take up as much space as we can.
So you're not going to invest in half off Dyke March barriers?
I think it's a great idea. I think that maybe there might be another way to make it happen. Maybe it was a private company that then would put it up and not the official New York City police that we would be able to work with. Yeah.
Talk to me about the danger. Obviously, this makes you a magnet for, I assume, a ton of hate. So, working with Dyke March, what is kind of the stuff that you've experienced with them?
Do you mean now?
No. I want to
historically.
We're gonna get. I want to
into this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's been happening for so long. So we train marshals every year on what to do if you get arrested, how to interact with police, and often there's a very, very low risk of that. It's often when folks have been arrested at Dyke March, it's intentional. They want to make a statement. So the dangers are really elsewhere because it's not a listed parade route or anything like that. We'll often get tourists or very angry bike messengers or folks like that at the march itself. Religious protesters, counter protesters in that way. Transphobic folks often because the day of the Dyke March, I mean, the Dyke March was my favorite day of the year for a very long time because dykes can just show up in all of our bodies in whatever way we are. So we can be happy, we can be sad, we can be topless, we can be, topless in whatever bodies we have, trans bodies, all bodies, and that can make people very angry just by showing up in that way. And so that's really where the dangers tended to lie, mostly with folks who are not happy that we were dykes taking up space. They did not appreciate that.
They didn't like dyke space. Next question is, so both of you left Dyke March last year. Why? What was that?
Well, I think for Nate, it was leaving the committee. For me, I made the decision not to come back. And I had toyed with the idea for a little while. And when political climate just started to rise and I couldn't go to the spaces that I used to feel like home, like the lesbian bars that I used to walk into and just feel so comfortable in because of the political climate rising. I didn't register for any of the committees that I was thinking of. And then I was sitting in a friend's apartment who had registered for a committee and was we were just co-working, and they were listening to their meeting. And then the conversation came up about what to do if an Israeli flag came to the march. And the red flags just went off. Like, when did it come to be this conversation that we're being singled out?
Why did that hit you specifically? What's like you hear a conversation about that. What is your connection to? Is it an Israel thing? Is it a Jewish thing? When you hear that conversation, what is the trigger point in you?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're interconnected. Like, Jews exist in Israel, and Israel is a, for a lack of a better word, is a Jewish state. And so Jews have always had a connection to Israel. And so when you see the Israeli flag, it's not just a country, it's not just a national symbol. It has a Jewish star on it. It's the star that is part of our religion. It's part of our larger culture, and it's always going to be connected to us in some way.
Was there you had, so this happened last year, correct? Yeah. Sorry.
No. I was going to say I can actually tell you exactly when we started to talk about the Israeli flag.
Yeah,
that was in
Yeah.
2017. So all of the Dyke marches are not connected. And so in 2017, Chicago started to ban Jewish pride flags. So pride flags just with the Star of David. The idea was to be in solidarity with Palestinian dykes because that pride flag was reflective of the Israeli flag. And then every year after that, the conversation would come to New York because folks would message New York and say, are you doing the same thing? Or would think that we were Chicago. So DC did after that. And then so we had to have all these conversations about, do we want to do the same thing? And every year it came back to this idea, there was a few different threads. One was just inclusion, knowing that the Star of David means a lot of different things to a lot of different Jews. And so that would be exclusionary, knowing how many Jews are in New York. The other thing was if we wanted to, they said it was to ban nationalist symbols in DC. And so when we would have these conversations, we would take it to the next level and say, okay, what does that mean for somebody coming from any country that's hostile to LGBTQ folks, but they see this, whatever flag it is, as a way of reclaiming their pride in this country. And so it can be a Russian flag or any state that is hostile. And so then it would extend to that. And we wouldn't want to tell somebody who has fought so hard to feel good about their nationality or background that this is the space that they can come and be all of the things. They can be queer and they can be whatever else. And so by banning nationalist symbols, that would also mean banning all of these other things.
Did they ban the Gaza flag, Palestinian flag version of that?
No. I mean, so New York up until last year never banned any flags. The only thing that they would say would be, but even in DC and Chicago they also didn't. They only banned the Jewish pride flag.
So that's am I wrong in thinking that that's an actual problem?
No, I mean you're not wrong, but it was a bit of that's what was so not hard, but it was a bit of a convoluted conversation because you're saying national symbols and the only thing it's applying to is this specific national symbol, so then call it what it is. And then eventually they really just started to say that this was solely about Israel, and then you can have more of a conversation then about how anti-Semitism plays into it.
Are you in these conversations?
I started with the committee in some form around 2013, and then I was involved fairly regularly until 2023, like December-ish of 2023.
So
And then you tried to go back.
And then I tried to go back.
what happened?
Do not recommend it. No, so 2023, we started to have this conversation where folks were saying that we were getting messages around wanting to do a statement in solidarity of like Palestinian support. This was an off season during the Dyke March, meaning the Dyke March planning season is active from like March to like July-ish, and then folks would take a break. So this was a very dormant period where not a ton of folks were on. So we started to get messages there, and then we started to have the conversations around what this would mean. This was very, very early on, right? This like, maybe 2 months after October 7th. And so the conversations were hard for a few reasons. Like we tried to have this inclusion conversation around the kinds of words they wanted to use. They really wanted to be kind of very vocal and firm, and trying to have the conversations around the way that this can embolden anti-Semitism was very difficult, both because there weren't a lot of folks who had a direct connection. So my wife is Israeli, and so I'm sitting at home where we've got Israeli radio on to make sure we can listen for when the, rockets are falling, to see when our family is safe. And she's checking the news every day to see like the more lists of the folks who have died and the hostage and all of that. And so this was very much in my home. And so to have these conversations with most of the committee who were white Christians with zero connection to Israel was very difficult, because they solely saw it as this kind of political ideology that they needed to spread versus it being a very like human experience. And so those conversations became very dehumanizing very quickly, and it became impossible to really have any sort of productive conversation.
Were you pushing back on them? And like, did you experience anything back, or is it just like there was such a tidal wave of one-sidedness on this?
Yeah, during those conversations, during that iteration of this, I would try, because we were able to have these kinds of difficult conversations elsewhere, and often what would happen, especially if it was with like a group of folks who have been historically marginalized and don't have a ton of representation on the committee, the way that it often worked was if somebody had a very strong feeling about something, we wouldn't move forward with a thing, and we would be able to have a discussion about it. And this felt very different. And so then I understood that there was not a full understanding of Jewish communities and Jewish identities, and this idea of oppressed versus oppressor, that I understood that they were just putting Jews in this oppressed bucket mostly, and specifically Israelis as well. And that folks didn't have a full understanding of Israel as a place, and that, the demographic makeup of Israel, or that Palestinians live all throughout Israel, not just in Gaza. And so then I understood that there were so many layers that folks didn't necessarily want to learn or unlearn, or didn't think it had any relevance to our conversation, when for me it completely changed the way we could talk about it. So something that was always frustrating was we wanted more things, like we have more things in common than we don't. And so by not being able to have a conversation about this accurately, about what was happening, we weren't helping anyone. Yeah. We're not helping Palestinians. We're not helping Israelis. Like, we're not helping Jews or Muslims here. We were helping no one.
No, I 100% agree with that last part. And like, it's something that definitely I have experienced. Right now we're in the mayoral election days. And something that I keep on running up against is that like so many needless enemies are made throughout, a lot of these causes. I remember a couple of weeks ago when Hannah Einbinder posted that thing about like fund abortion, not war. That like is one completely illogical, but also like it creates an automatic divot. It was very uncomfortable seeing the amount. A couple blocks away from here, there was a from Mexico to Gaza, globalize the Intifada chant. Like these are things that have nothing to do with this other thing, but it's almost like the Israel question has been smushed in and then is used as a litmus test to decide, like, are you on our side or are you on another person's side? When in fact, this is at best a 50-50 issue. It can't be treated like a 90-10 issue. And it's just created, I look at, I don't know who you guys ranked or anything, but look at like Zoran Mamdani's like stuff. And to me, he can hate Israel or whatever. I always was just like, throwing a couple government-funded supermarkets into a food desert, why not? Like, free buses? Sure, I love it. Why not? Like, the Staten Island Ferry's free. Why not make the buses free? But it's like, we can't get to there because we're dealing with all this other bullshit where like we're not able to like push the logistics of, of these like pie in the sky, crazy ideas that like ultimately are good. They're not supermarkets aren't going to like destabilize the crime rates or anything like that, but we can't get there. And I feel like with the LGBTQ community, my guess is that we can't get to so many of the conversations in the spaces because it immediately is decided, you're on this side, so you can't talk. We're not going to have a conversation. And it does also feel a little bit like the college campuses where for years they separated these communities. If you were Hillel, you weren't talking to the not CUAD, or MF?
USG.
Yeah, USG. And then there's another one.
SJP.
SJP. But there's so
many acronyms.
Yeah. AT&T wouldn't let you talk to them. But like the way to solve that was to put them in corners. And then when October 7th happened, the campuses exploded. What was your kind of experience when, like, did you try to fight back on this? Did you bring this up? Like, was there pushback on your side?
So as a marshal, I wasn't like part of any committees. So I had thought about joining the committee the next year, kind of take a larger role in planning the Dyke March committee. But when all of that started to happen, I just couldn't. It just felt like my voice wouldn't really be able to be heard amongst everything. And I wasn't sure what I could be getting into.
Interesting. So you like left at a certain point. Did you make like a grand... Oh, sorry, go.
No, it's okay. I just didn't rejoin. So the way it works is that you are there like from when you start. So every year they start recruiting marshals around like March time. And so you go to trainings, you learn everything that Nate shared about the role of a marshal and how's our job to keep everyone, the marchers, safe. And then you show up the day of the march and you keep everyone safe. You do your role, and then you have the choice to come back a year later. When
you decided not to come back, did you like tell people, or was it just kind of like an Irish exit out of Dyke March?
Yeah, it was kind of like a group decision that I made with my friends that the conversation started that, wow, like it's getting worse and worse. And I think what was the pulling point for me was there was this post that was put out on Instagram. And I think that the quote was not using Jewish voices to, what's the word I'm looking for that came after that?
Condo board.
It was using Jewish voices to, it basically kind of like to sway one way or another, like people's opinions. And it was just like really scary. And it became clear that it was a Jewish issue and not just a political issue. Like they made it seem, so some friends asked me like that were kind of looking to me to know if this is something that we should do together and continue. And they're just like, no, like I can't, how could I?
So what is like you like didn't go back, but then like what happened next with you? Like were there other groups that were joined? I mean, you're both here. Is there like a group that was kind of started in its place? And when you did start doing this stuff, like, were you surprised at the numbers of people?
Yeah. I mean, for me, like the way that this started, it was just like, it was a conversation. Like we were just like, okay, we can't go to the Dyke March, but this is our day. We are Dykes. Everyone else is going to be out there marching. What should we do? Like we want to be in community. And so we got together. It was a random way that I got.
It's very gay.
Yes. I can give you like the abridged version of the story, but I want
to know the very gay version of the story, obviously.
Well, one night, it's cloudy. I was at a local lesbian bar in Brooklyn, Ginger's, with a friend, and I saw this person wearing a Dyke March shirt, and we started chatting on the bathroom line. And I said, yeah, like I used to marshal too, because you only have a shirt usually if you marshal, like you can purchase them, but most people marshal or.
I make fake ones on Amazon, by the way. I make a killing every year selling fake Dyke March stuff.
I thought you might. I felt it.
I'm that Etsy guy.
Yeah. I might need to take a gander at those at some point.
I'm purchasing stuff for everybody. Pro, anti-Israel, Dyke March, MAGA. I got them all going.
Make a good business.
It's all made in China. It's all cyclical at the end of the day.
But yeah, we got to chatting, and then we left. We went home, and then I got a text from my friends the next day, and I'm like at a guitar lesson, and they're like, Sage, is this you? And it was a Lex post, Misconnections. If you're familiar with how that works, it's kind of similar to on Craigslist.
Yeah.
And it was a Misconnections post talking about our conversation and saying that she had someone that she wanted to connect me with.
This guy.
This was on Reddit, or is this on...
It's called Lex.
Lex.
It's like a queer Reddit, kind of.
Okay. Yeah, it's like a...
No one told me. I didn't get the...
Honestly, it's for the best. It's a lot.
I'm on lesbian Twitter. MLB Twitter is what I would say. Wait, this is an adorable story, by the way.
I forgot about the story until you just started telling it.
Okay, so lesbian Reddit is ablaze with this conversation. Then you get pushed over to you, and then you're like, we've been making this thing. So what is the thing that you were making?
Yeah, well, now it's called Shalom Dikes. And so it started once I left the Dyke March committee. I wasn't going to do anything, was just going to go to have a picnic in the park with, friends and have a nice day. But then a few weeks before, I started to get messages from all kind of parts of my Jewish communities saying that folks didn't feel comfortable going to the Dyke March and they want to know what was going on. And then folks wanted a counter protest. And that felt a little dangerous to me because there are so many police there. It didn't feel like the right move. And so I thought if we could have something positive that we can bring folks together to, then we can create something else separate that can have the same vibe of the Dyke March, but could feel like a safer place where we can feel just where we can still be together. And so that's how we got a few organizers got together and we all got connected, and that's how we created this now grassroots Dyke Jewish community, which is very cool.
Wait, I want to back up one second. What was it like when you left? I mean, that was a significant, no offense to you. I think you're a lot younger, and it seems like newer to Dyke March. You were part of it for a very, very long time. That's like a gaping hole, I assume, that all of a sudden was dropped from your life.
Yeah, it sure was. What was really tough was that I had built relationships over the course of 10 years, very strong, deep relationships, because we needed to trust one another enough to be able to keep one another safe on this day when we were responsible for 40,000 dikes. And so that was really tough. So when I first left, it was just because the conversations were very stressful. I was having heart palpitations. I was I can't be involved in this anymore, way too much. And so I wasn't sure if I was going to leave entirely. And then I left and I was oh, this is for the better. And also I understood that the conversations really weren't going to be productive anymore. That folks didn't think my experience and my expertise was a valid part of the conversation. And so it felt like it was just only going to continue to be much harder. And then throughout, I kind of saw the way that it unfolded, and it unfolded in really tough ways. So their theme was Dikes against genocide. They put some Instagram...
Which was, by the way, that was actually my bar mitzvah theme.
I thought
Dikes against and the Edison Ramada, in Jersey.
You were always on the pulse of
I knew,
the queer community. You didn't
ahead
even know.
of my time. Who knew? Wait, that's great. Wait, that's wild.
Yeah.
The theme of it after was Dikes against genocide?
Yeah, so the themes every year. So I was just in the Lesbian History Archives, and I was looking through some of the materials, and it explicitly says that every year the Dyke March has a theme. It's meant to be timely and meaningful, but not politically sectarian. And that was from the foundational, from 93, this was from minutes of 1990, the 1996 meeting. But this was the idea. The idea was always to be a space where all dykes could come with all of their political ideologies. So they can come with their signs, they can come with the causes that were important to them, but that no dyke should be excluded from this march because of anything.
Why is Israel the thing? Out of all of the things, and I get complaints again, I get it. I hate Bibi. I'm pretty open about I totally get it, but it's such a random thing.
It is and it isn't, I think. So queer communities in general are intentionally exclusionary. So they want to say in this space, we are going to be able to, out there, we can't keep you safe. We know that there's LGBTQ phobia everywhere. And so in this space, we want to make sure that it can be as safe as possible so you don't have to deal with that. So here, we're going to make sure that we are against transphobia, we are against racism, we are against all the things that we want to make sure that you have to deal with out there, you don't have to deal with in here. And because I think there's many different things, you could probably write a dissertation on it. Some of it is how social justice frameworks are mapped. Some of it is that Jewish communities are complex and Jewish identities are complex and we don't fit neatly into these categories. Some of it is Israel and the history of Israel and its uniqueness in that. Some of it is anti-Semitism and not folks not having a good understanding of anti-Semitism, the way it functions, the way it shows up in a way that we do other identities and communities. And so you've got this idea of like Jews, I don't have to go through the anti-Semitic tropes, you understand.
This is an interesting question that I think I have. Lately I've been struggling with this base fact that Jews are terrible at talking to non-Jews. I think that we have done a terrible job at communicating and about communicating our history, our messaging and stuff like that. If you had to go back in time, and let's say 5 years before, you start to feel, I guess like 2017, I think is when you said that there was like stuff going on. Like, what tactic would you have changed? Is there anything that you could have done, or was it just like an inevitability that this split was going to happen?
Yeah, I avoided the conversation explicitly for a very long time. So when we would have these conversations and then we were able to talk about nationalist flags overall, I was like, amazing, great. I can talk about this and I don't have to get into Israel because I don't want to get into Israel because I know it's going to be so hard. And so I think prior to this, I would have explicitly had the conversation. So the foundations would have already been set. And so I didn't have to have this because my wife is Israeli. And so once I started dating my wife and going to Israel all the time and seeing it firsthand and understanding and like learning more and understanding that the way that folks were talking about it here was not reflective of the realities there, I would have brought that conversation much sooner to these spaces.
What's specific? Like, if you had to, what would be 3 plot points? 3 like specific like things that you would kind of like target?
Yeah. So with this conversation, I think one is the binary of like pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli doesn't have to be the case. Part of this conversation is holding multiple truths and being able to have empathy for multiple people at one time. And so the first would be that you don't have to be for one or against the other. You can be actually for everyone. And that's okay in some ways, right? Like obviously not always. I just mean that the dichotomy itself isn't as firm as people think it is. Just with this conversation, right? If you could say like, I am against dehumanizing people. I am against, bombing civilians, right? Any of those things we could have all agreed on. Like it was just the way that it was anyway. So that's beside the point. So just to say the dichotomy itself is not as clear. The second thing would be the role that Israel holds for many people, that it is, some people see Zionism in general. I guess I also would have explicitly had a conversation about Zionism because I avoided it for so long.
Big time. Same.
Yeah. Just because it was scary. But just that Israel itself and Zionism itself, for many Jews, is an integral part of Judaism overall. Israel is mentioned however many times it is in the scripture. We pray to the next year in Jerusalem, all the things that it's cannot be separated. And so I think that would be one thing. And then the last thing I think would be to, what I've seen with the Dyke March is that there are like good Jews and bad Jews. And like that so many folks, the way that they're like utilizing Jews within the Dyke March is awful. And so I think I would have addressed that before and also been told my like younger self that like, it's okay to not be a good Jew. Like it's the way that they're setting this up is terrible, and they would never do this. They would not say you're like a good trans person. Like it's not the same.
No, you're 1,000%. First of all, a big thing is that whether the uncomfortable thing about Israel is that 89%, according to Pew, 89% of Jews have a positive association. That is by definition what Zionism is. Whenever I see certain groups that amp up the amount of like, here's our Jews, it's like full on tokenization. It's full on, look, we got, Jewish friends over here. I agree with so much what you're saying also. It's weird the parallels here because in the comedy community, grumblings before October 7th. I remember that like anytime Israel was brought up, no one was happy with it, but it was always like mentioned with the same like fervor of like as like anti-filibuster. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like a thing.
Yeah.
Like it was just like, it was always the 15th thing that we cared about. It was always like for years and years and years. And then the pandemic happened and things, I think everyone got really heightened and stuff like that. And then the way that the pandemic really ended, you can make an argument, it ended 2 times. One, George Floyd protest was the first time that news had moved on from the pandemic. And then like October 7th, like the elections and October 7th kind of like all merged into one like goop that has kind of like changed everything. And it's just weird how like all of a sudden it is everything. It went from being like a thing. I wish that I could, like, just like you, I wish I could have gone back in time and had bigger conversations about Zionism. What is the definition of Zionism? Why, the difference between, I don't know how I am lumped in with Bibi Netanyahu. Like the fact that there's like, it is such a spectrum, which is also crazy because out of all of the communities to recognize a spectrum,
Yeah, well, that's what's hard now is when I went back to the Dyke March again this last year and I tried to have the conversation with them, they know that there are different definitions of Zionism, and they know that a majority of Jews see Zionism as just like having a Jewish homeland and having that and having like Israel be that homeland and a historic homeland, all of that. And the definitions that they are going with for Zionism is it's like far right-wing conservative. No queer person I've ever heard has ever defined Zionism in that way. Maybe the far reaches of like the Israeli government have, but that's why they're able to separate it in this way, that they're able to say Zionism is racism, Zionism is a harmful colonialist ideology, because they're defining it in a specific way, knowing that many other Jews don't define it in this way. There are some Jews that do and say it's okay that you're doing this, but there are so many others. And so it's tough because I'm like, maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, because I know now that they know that there are, they know now the conversation about Zionism is layered and they don't care.
But more people would have known. I've always thought, like, realistically, it's protest leaders. They are the ones that are deciding this conversation. They're the ones that decide the terminology. They're the ones that are okay with globalizing the intifada. They know that it riles people up. They already decided that that's a terminology. I wish that we at least had that conversation years ago, so that at least when free agents were out there and able to be brought on, because it is a team sport at the end of the day. This is, the teams, by the way, shout out my Lindor bobblehead. If we had an open, if the information was out there and we let more people decide, I think it would have been slightly, easier. What changes would you have done?
Gosh. I mean, I think for me, like, when I started, like, was thinking about getting more involved, I think something that was important to me was trans issues. As time went on for me, as I evolved and became more of the person that I am, got more involved and claimed the word trans for myself, being called a Dyke March, it has those kind of fears about, like, is this space for everyone? Is it just for people that identify as lesbians? What is a lesbian considered? Like,
the eternal question.
Yes. Right. It's that inside, like, what does that mean?
Also, why do bad things happen to good people? What's up with that?
You ask the eternal questions. So, I mean, that was a big thing for me. It was like, is this a space for me? And when I went to the marshal training, it was one of the folks that was there was a trans person, and that just, I felt so comforted by that, and I said, like, oh, like, this is a space for me, like, this is a space that I can be in. And then it wasn't anymore, and as again we mentioned, for Jewish reasons. And I think, honestly, like, everything that Nate said, I would agree with. Like, I think the dichotomy and this, like, binary conversation has become really scary, and I think that is something that I would really personally like to see change. I want to be able to sit in a room with people from all different backgrounds, from all different religions, and have a meal and share in our grief and joy.
Yeah. It's interesting because the other side of this is, like, unfortunately, on a lot of the Israel side, it's like people that, also stand, like, way against, the LGBTQ community. How have you, like, have you had to reckon? Is that a thing that you've ever, like, had to reckon with when, a lot of it just have strange bedfellows? Like, we agree with Ben Shapiro, like, it just sucks. It is what it is, on everything. Correct. No, but, like, what is that even like? Cause I'm sure that's even broad. It's been brought up to me where, it's like, oh, you support Israel. Like, you're just like, TK, asshole who hates Palestinians. Like, have you ever had to deal with any of that specific critique?
Do you want to? No. I mean, yes. Of course, right? Like, part of what's so hard is having these communities that no longer feel like your community. So not being able to, it's one of the things with the Dyke March is, like, I don't understand now, to what end was this? Does this mean that my Israeli wife can't show up? We can't show up with our Israeli friends? Like, what exactly are we trying to get at? But that's the feeling when we're
what is their answer to that? Like, do Israelis have an ability to go to these marches?
So the short answer is that they don't have an answer to it, right? Because I think a lot of this is not theoretical, but it is wanting to project this more of an idea, right? That it's saying, by saying anti-Zionism, we are trying to project kind of who we want in this space and who we believe in, and not understanding that that excludes it, like that excludes actual real humans, because of this, that it's not the same thing as saying we don't want folks who are transphobic. It's not a one-to-one, and so there's not that understanding. And so for them, they're like, well, yeah, sure, Israelis can come if they believe in anti-Zionism, and not understanding why that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and how that becomes difficult.
How have you reckoned with that strange bedfellows question? Which, by the way, great question. Excellent question.
For the big gay episode?
Yeah, for the big gay episode. Big gay JYT, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I've just really wanted to be able to continue these conversations and be able to have access to information. And I think that that's been a thing that I've noticed a lot, is that it's really easy to get caught onto buzzwords. A lot of people get their information from social media, Instagram, Twitter,
the worst places, the places where there's no even censorship. It's just there's the issue. CNN isn't fact checking any of the stuff that's on TikTok. Yeah,
right. Yeah, TikTok too. Yeah. And they're relying on these 5-sentence infographics as their information on historical, geopolitical situations about countries that they've never been to before.
Yeah.
And that's something that scares me, because I think that if I hadn't been to Israel 3 times before and had made connections there, that maybe I too could have believed what I read, being from Gen Z, being born into the iPhone generation and the social media generation. And it opened my eyes, post October 7th, that I have to read, that you can't rely on the influencers and these people that are just like, they're on their phones, like writing these summarizings for you
because it looks pretty. I think the thing is that people were able to make it look pretty. So if it looks pretty, it looks like it's well done, like there's budget behind. But now Canva can make anything. I can put anything into Canva and make it look like like an infographic. 100%. The misinformation, the technology has made everything like so much easier to produce and so much more rounded that it is like an actual problem they have to do. First of all, I want to point out to everyone at home, the air conditioner is broken in my living room. I'm not joking. I looked, it was 99 degrees outside, so it's very stuffy here. I got 2 more questions that I wanted to do. Oh my God, thank you so much. Unfortunately, you know what's actually funny?
Fans not gay? I think all fans are gay.
You know what's actually very funny? I play roller hockey in New York, which a lot of people say is the most athletic. It's the height of athleticism on the Upper East Side. And I was given Pride tape, which, years ago there was an issue in the NHL where they were getting rid of Pride tape because out of all the leagues, the NHL is the most MAGA from like a leadership perspective, and a lot of Russian tie-ins. The Russians don't like the gays and stuff like that. So I was given Pride tape, and I just kept on using it. But then the next time I had to buy Pride tape, it was the cheapest of the tape at that point because it was, I had to buy it, and I kept on using the Pride tape. And then I found out that, so someone approached me and they were like, oh, like, thank you for supporting the community. I had someone on my hockey team who is a member of the LGBTQ community and came over. He's like, by the way, like, I don't know if you're a part of the community or just supporting. And I accidentally just sent it. I'm like, oh, this is the cheapest one actually. And then I smoothed it over right afterwards. So still an ally. Okay, so 2 questions that I got for you. 1, awkward question. I recently saw a post by someone. I forgot her name. She's incredible. She's an Israeli Instagram person who brought up this point about the LGBTQ community being tokenized by pro-Israel groups because realistically, the government in Israel... they also aren't the biggest fans of the LGBTQ community. Can you talk about just like the realities? Yes, there's a ton of gay Jews in Israel. That's just like what it is. There's a ton of gay non-Jews in it. There's a lot of gays there, right? So talk to me a little bit about like the relationship between the government in Israel, the queer community in Israel, and just how you reckon that, included also with the tokenization that I'm sure happens with that. I'm sorry if that was 80 things.
No, it's an excellent question because there's a lot there. So when we're thinking about LGBTQ communities in Israel, Israel is a Jewish country, religious country, which means that there's no constitution, and so a lot of the rights are they're like fought culturally, but it's like within the cultural context. And so when I talk to like LGBTQ Israelis, they're like talking like marriage wasn't necessarily the focus, but family rights were, because family is such a big thing in Israel. And so fighting that within like the religious context. So there's that relationship with the government. When we're thinking about it more broadly, the conversations that LGBTQ communities have here that are so that folks see as against Israel, that furthers LGBTQ phobia in Israel, and so there's that relationship generally, and so and now with the war, a lot of the social services that they were getting, that LGBTQ communities were getting funded from the government, have been diverted, and so LGBTQ communities generally in Israel are like struggling, right? I mean, as is everything, and so that's what I would say. Like the relationship is tough. There are rights when folks say that that Israel is the only place where LGBTQ folks can thrive, which is it's true. But when you say that to folks here, it's not a very effective way of talking about this, because folks here are deeply concerned about like human rights for Palestinians, and that's their sole focus. And they're saying homophobia is everywhere. We know that. We know governments are homophobic. We know governments are LGBTQ phobic. And so when you say something like you're going to go to Gaza and not be okay, that's less effective to them, because they're saying you can say that for many, many places. I am really focused on like the human rights abuses that I deeply care about. That's my focus here, and so it doesn't it's not helpful.
Yeah. How do you kind of reckon with like the tokenization element of it also, where I feel like it's like people in MAGA hats who are just like the gays are free, and but they don't care. Like it does feel sometimes like they're just saying it as a talking point, when realistically they've kind of made it not a great run of things. Do you feel that at all?
Yeah, I mean, pinkwashing was a big conversation, and it was just like we had to speak up, because we were sitting in between these like different places here where we were queer, we're Jews, and we're being told that by celebrating our identities in Israel, we were covering like Tel Aviv Pride and Jerusalem Pride are like the biggest prides like in the world, and by having these celebrations, by outwardly expressing our identities, we were covering up the faults of the government, and it became like an interconnected conflict that that we had to speak on. And when I did an internship with the Aguda, which is like the LGBTQ organization, or an LGBTQ organization is part of the government.
Yeah, I mean, they're all kind of part of the government. It works differently there, but it's like kind of like the Human Rights Campaign. It's like the major
kind of it's like during COVID online with folks from all over the world, and the conversation that we had was like that we are like the main purpose was to help queer folks be able to adopt, and be able to like another point was also to be able to spread gatherings, like create gatherings in our own communities here, and so there was nothing about the political agenda that we were trying to enforce. And I think that's just kind of how we were called in.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and also just like answer like the question clearly. It feels bad. It feels really bad. Like I want to walk into a synagogue and like not worry about where I'm going to sit because it's gendered. So I want to walk in knowing that I can walk in as my queer self, and I want nothing more than just to go to the Dyke March like I did everywhere and be surrounded by dykes and feel okay being a Jewish dyke coming with my Israeli wife and everything feeling okay, and like not having to be a token in any sort of specific way, and just being able to exist and not feel like I need to fragment different parts of myself for different communities.
Yeah. I really don't have any more questions just on the Dyke March stuff. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you kind of want to like say about Dyke March? It's interesting because my initial kind of answer question, my initial way that I would probably end this would be like, what steps need to take place in order to get you back to Dyke March? But it seems like it's a bigger question than just what does Dyke March need to do, because like there's been a stance that's been taken here that in order to even Dyke March is the fourth thing to get to. The first three questions are, like, why did this happen? XYZ, who's making these decisions, conversation with so it's not even like there's a real question of like what could happen, because it seems like nothing could happen at this point aside from, your group becoming bigger and, becoming, just a big tent that can, that functions and can celebrate pride.
I have one word, and it's unlearning.
Yeah. There you go. My one word? Condo board. That's right, 2 words.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it because it's the Dyke March is an example of this much larger problem that we're seeing. I would say, like, I don't love to label anything, but like across, let's say, progressive communities, that we're seeing Israel itself and Zionism generally become this fragmented a thing that is like fracturing communities. And there's this feeling of I don't know, like I'm like thinking about like Dikes, like I'm against genocide. I don't know anyone who's going to say that they're for genocide. And so there's this feeling of like I am against the things we need to be against. Right now, like trans rights are under attack in so many different ways, and it's like so difficult. Like immigration, like there's so many very real, very pressing issues that I want to build coalitions with others and that we agree on and that we can work together on. And so, but because there's this like purity test and litmus test, I know that they're also kind of buzzwords now, but because there's this line that says we cannot cross because this is how we're thinking about this, it's hurting all of our communities, and it's hurting our ability to actually make real impactful change. And so what I think might need to happen is that folks, there needs to be like a higher tolerance, I don't want to say for conflict, but to be able to like mediate things. One of the great things about the Dyke March was that it was an intergenerational space, and so many of the conversations we were able to have were hard. You're coming from this way, whether it was about trans inclusion or anything, and we were able to have the conversations to say, I know you care about my community, I know that you mean well, let's figure out exactly what's going on here. And if we really are incompatible, if we really do disagree, if we really disagree on human rights and social justice generally and our vision for the future, then okay. Then it might not make sense for us to like build together, but that's not the case here. It's like a problem that doesn't need to be a problem. And so for me, that's what I think would need to change, is just an ability to not give on values, but be able to like have a difficult conversation.
I thought
sit in that discomfort.
Yeah, sit in the discomfort and the ambiguity, and understand that by saying something is not complex, it doesn't mean you're giving in to say, I'm okay with something bad happening. It's saying that like we can talk about things in like layered, complex ways, which queer folks should be great at.
I thought that you put it with the tolerance for conflict. I think that obviously that's a heightened word of it, but just we should be able to disagree without certain terminology and stuff like that just being able to fly. At least the other side needs to hear us out so that they understand, and they need to acknowledge that this stuff makes us uncomfortable before they kind of do it. That's all. A lot of times that's what I've been looking for, especially with the Zoran thing, where I'm like, can you guys at least acknowledge like a little bit that this is why this is a problem? You can say you're voting for him, but like even getting the little bit, and Zoran is just the thing of the moment. It's been 50,000 fucking things over is we're here literally. It's election day, and it was like the acknowledgement is definitely like a big part of that. Before we end here, 2 members of the LGBTQ community, I would be remiss if I did not ask how the Mets Pride Night happened. And the Mets have gone, I think, 2-9.
No, I'm really sorry. I am personally really sorry about
that. What the fuck? Last year, the Gay Grimace Mets.
I know. I will say.
What happened?
The Mets Pride Night, I think, is one of the best Pride Nights. It's so fun. Good. And it's also just so entertaining because the Jumbotron is just like a bunch of queers in the audience having a really great time. And so it's like a great time just to be there. They've got the logos, and they've got like great merch. It actually is really special. I grew up as a Mets fan. And so one of the things that my brother and I would joke about was saying, well, no equality happens when they feature like a queer kiss on the Jumbotron.
Oh my God.
And here we are. Yeah. It happened, and now
the Yankees would never. Let me just say the Yankees would never.
I mean, I've heard that about Yankees Pride Night. I've never been, but I've heard that they actually don't go all out in the same way that the Mets do.
I bet Yankees Pride Night. Remember when Pride March became like sponsored by Chase?
Yeah.
I bet that's what Yankee Pride March is. Just like completely devoid. It's sponsored by Lockheed Martin too. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Where can people find your group? Give the whole spiel.
Shalom Dikes is the name. It is meant to say shalom as in welcome. Come to and be Dikes with us. Yes. It's shalomdikes.com, shalomdikes@gmail. I think this is coming out after the big party that we're having, but we are having a party on the 28th, and we'll have a bunch throughout the year. So, like, truly everyone is welcome as long as,
Minor league baseball outing, to be completely honest. There needs to be more minor. I go to so many minor league baseball. Last year I broke the Guinness record for most first pitches thrown in a year.
No
Swear to
way.
God, 350 first pitches. I went
350?
I threw 350. Oh. Not through. That would have been.
I was like, whoa,
absolutely insane. But I went to a ton of minor league baseball stadiums, and I will say that some of the Pride nights at the minor league baseball stadiums I overlapped with. A lot of fun. I think it was not the Mud Hens. It was like the Jumbo Shrimp or something. I was at their Pride thing. Anyway, shout out to the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. What up? This has been the Big Gay special episode of the New York Times. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back every week. We do this. I'll talk to you guys later. Barstool.